Is it going to be the Big Ten and the SEC battling it out from now on for national championships? Hey, 12-team playoffs coming. Things are changing. The transfer portal has changed things. NIL has changed things. We're in a new world of college football. Realignment, at least what we're going to know of it, hadn't for this season hadn't completely gone underway, right? Washington, technically a Pac-12 team. This was the end of the Pac-12, and Texas, end of being in the Big 12 for them. They both make the playoff. But when you look at it and the way people might advertise it is, oh, two SEC teams versus two Big Ten teams. Well, not quite, but yeah, starting next year, that would have been the case that the 14 playoff, it would have been two SEC and two Big Ten if it was starting next season, right? It's just going to be these two conferences from now on. I think that it's clear where the power lies, but it's clear where the power has been this entire time, and it's always, at the very minimum, been in the SEC. But the Big Ten, look, they get to the playoff, right? They send a top team to the playoff most of the time, whether it be Michigan or Ohio State. They've sent someone to the college football playoff, I believe, almost every single year. I think maybe there was one year where they were left out. Yeah, it was. I'm blanking now on if the Big Ten's ever been left out. Regardless, it's not going to get left out anymore when it moves to the 12, and they're going to at least have an auto bid in the top four. I would imagine that the Big Ten runner-up and possibly the third best team in the Big Ten also make that 12-team college football playoff. I mean, we're talking about Ohio State, just brands now, and programs that have been competitive recently. Ohio State, Michigan. Yeah, you have to throw Penn State in there when we're talking about a 12 team. Have to throw Oregon in there. Have to throw Washington in there. Can Lincoln Riley and USC do that? I think the Iowas and the Wisconsins of the world, this changes things for them. And that's what I think most of these things change for those middle of the pack teams, those worst teams. I actually think things are going to be a little bit harder for them to make a playoff, but maybe there's a magical run where a program like I don't know, like a South Carolina goes 10-2. But then you look at the SEC, and while they win a lot of national championships, and you think about the last few, Georgia, Bama, LSU, right? So literally the last four national championships have been SEC teams, and I don't have the statistic right in front of me, but whatever the percentage is during the last 15 years, SEC teams winning. It's been a lot. So I think it's going to boil down to these two mega conferences here in the future because, look, the ACC and the Big 12, it's just not the same. Ryan Curley from Dawg Post talking about, look, we're talking about the playoff. We're talking about the national championship. The national championship is in a few hours. It's today. I'm recording this on Monday. This is going out on Monday. Washington and Michigan are going to be playing for the college football playoff national championship tonight. Washington beat Texas and Michigan beat Alabama. The Big Ten will probably end up advertising that as, oh, look, two of our squads beat two of the SEC squads going in, and they'll probably feel like they have momentum heading into this 12-team deal, heading into 2024. Look, a harsh reality is, and maybe it's not true this time, but harsh reality is the best team doesn't always win. Right, and we've thought Georgia was the best team, and maybe Georgia's just not the best team, right? Maybe beating Alabama would have proven that Georgia was the best team and getting into the playoff. Maybe in hindsight, we have to take a step back and look at things and say maybe Georgia wasn't quite as good as what we thought they were. Still, regardless of what I think, what you think, most people believe they were one of the four best teams in college football, and that kind of brings it to one of my points is that the best team don't always win. Right? If Washington wins tonight, I think a lot of people would not think Washington was the best team in college football this year. All right? I think a lot of people would think it's Michigan still, even though they lost. I think a lot of people would have thought it was Georgia, right? I think some people would have thought it was Florida State. This is one of those years where there's definitely not a consensus. And I'll tell you what, though, the majority of the country is rooting for the Washington Huskies to beat Michigan tonight. What does this mean for Georgia? Look, Georgia's going to make these playoffs over and over and over again with Kirby Smart. Georgia should compete for a top four seed bid every year. That's the reality with this Georgia football program. Things are changing, though. No divisions, right? So it won't be the same schedule every year where Georgia has to play Missouri, South Carolina, Vanderbilt. It's going to change. Georgia, you know that. It's changing now. Georgia's going to go to Texas. Georgia's going to go to Alabama. Georgia's going to go to Ole Miss. So 2024 is going to be a very challenging college football season for Georgia in terms of that. But I think that we're I don't think realignment's done. Change is never really done, and I don't think change is done in college football. Definitely not. So eventually, we're probably moving to two giant mega conferences, based probably on the SEC and the Big Ten. That's a crazy, maybe 20, 30, 40, 50 year from now prediction. Maybe not that far away. But the more things change, the more I think we're going to end up with like two giant mega conferences playing each other, and it being a lot more like the NFL in terms of the structure of playoff and seeding and all that. I think it's just moving more and more towards that professional model in terms of that. But the Big 12 and the ACC are not going to be able to compete with the Big 10 and the SEC. Who are the ACC's biggest football brands? Well, Clemson, right? Florida State. Right? I mean, Louisville was the second best team in the ACC this year. I wasn't actually laughing at that. It is a little fun. I wasn't laughing at that. I actually had to cough, but that's my point. And then the new Big 12, is it going to be Colorado with Deion Sanders that takes a step forward and they kind of rule things out there? Is it Utah? Is it one of the Arizona schools, right? It just doesn't feel like there's as much power behind those two conferences. I mean, let's look at it, the SEC. Georgia, Bama, Texas, LSU. That's four right there. Four huge. Tennessee. Missouri. I mean, those are ranked teams, right? When we're talking about their fifth, sixth teams. I didn't mention Ole Miss. Throw Ole Miss in there. That was one of the teams I failed to mention there. We're talking about like 7 ranked teams, 8 ranked teams on a given year. And now the Big Ten is going to have Oregon and Washington, in addition to Ohio State and Michigan. That's already 4 there, where you drop those 4 into there, and they would be the best program in that conference, right? You would at least an argument for it. That's my point. Where would Tennessee rank in the ACC? Because I've been saying Tennessee is like the 5th or 6th best SEC football program right now, roughly, maybe 7th, something like that. I mean, immediately they would be like in the top 3 in the ACC. You probably would argue a similar sentiment over there out in the Big 12. Let's do the same exercise with the Big 10. You want to rank the programs? Right now it's Michigan at 1 there and Ohio State, but let's go with Washington, Oregon, Penn State. Penn State's probably your 5-ish, right? These are not exact rankings. USC. It's a little bit different with the Big Ten, not quite as powerful as the future of the SEC. I didn't even mention Oklahoma. I didn't mention Oklahoma on my SEC list. So bump that down even more one to where my point is. And that's that these other 2 conferences aren't going to be able to compete. We're heading towards even more unevenness. There's a reason why the ACC was blocking playoff expansion. It could have expanded this past season. We could have been in a 12-team playoff this year, and we'd probably be around the semifinals now. The calendar would have been a little bit different. But the ACC was a big proponent, and we don't want this. Why? I mean, an inference would be you're getting Clemson in there a lot, right? You're getting an ACC team in there, and they're winning national championships. So what happens when you expand to this bigger field and all of a sudden all of these good teams have a shot and they can taste the trophy? Are things going to be different for the Big 12 and the ACC? And I failed to even mention at this point, FSU is trying to get out of the ACC. So the moves are not over. All right, I don't think that I think there are going to be more moves. Are they going to be within the next year? I'm not sure. But we're heading towards a thing where the SEC and the Big Ten are just going to dominate this playoff. That's my prediction. Thanks for watching. Enjoy the national championship tonight.